Welcome everybody to the Passiflora YouTube channel. We're all going through some interesting times right now, and I wanted to just put something up that would bring joy to everybody. Through this time, we all need to focus on the beauty that is around us. So we're in the studio today, and we're going to be creating this beautiful arch with spring flowers. I wanted to build something for you that is an ode to spring. Some of the flowers that we're using today were going to be for a wedding last weekend, so I'd like this also to be an ode to the bride and groom, Chloe and Jesse. They were going to have a spring arch, so they're going to get their spring arch. It's just not going to be in person. Let's go through the flowers that we're going to be using today. So for this wedding that we were having this past weekend, my supplier sent some flowers that they were not able to resell. They were sent out Thursday, but probably with all the craziness, they actually didn't get here until Monday. We're going to go through those first, but I just wanted to let you know how resilient flowers are and how resilient people are in this time. So these flowers were out of water for 5 days, and they look beautiful. So we have jasmine vine, which is amazingly perked back up, very fragrant flowers, and we'll use that as our base. We have these Tibet roses, and they're nice and open. And butterfly ranunculus, one of my all-time favorites. Gorgeous spring blooms. This is a hellebore, otherwise known as the Lenten rose, and these were picked from my garden this morning. Especially love this one. This little doubly. For using these in floral design, you want to pick them at the right time, and you're going to wait until they're a little bit more mature and the anthers and the interior parts, these parts in here, have fallen off. What you're going to do is you're going to take a flame, just hold a flame up to those for 2 seconds to cauterize the end to keep the moisture up into the stem, and then put it in water. These beautiful daffodils came from my garden. You have a nice yellow, which I was debating whether I should pick to go with the colors, but that little pop of yellow is pretty irresistible. And this beautiful double peachy, of course these little buttery, it's like butter and eggs. I think this is the traditional Dutch master, all very beautiful. You want to put them in a separate container by themselves. You don't want to mix them with other flowers because they do have a poisonous sap. So you have to wait for that sap to kind of drip out and do its thing in its own little separate container of water before you use it in your floral design. Probably after 12 to 24 hours, they should be fine to use. And then here we have some flowering pear, which is lovely. Weeping cherry, this came from my garden. These are very delicate. I just picked them and they're already kind of falling apart, but 2 different varieties of the star magnolia. This one is kind of a blushy, it's very delicate. And then this is another variety of star magnolia. Then here we have sand cherry. In the autumn, the foliage turns this beautiful burgundy, which also makes it really nice for autumn floral design. First, I'm wrapping the arch structure with silver chicken wire. I'm using silver chicken wire because these blooms are light colored. If you're creating an arch using more greenery, then green chicken wire would probably be better, but because we're using a lot of really nice, light, airy spring blooms that are light in color, I'm going with the silver. I'm also using zip ties as I go along to make sure that it's not sliding up and down the structure too much. I'd also like to say that when you're doing this, think of the bottom as well. Usually there is some kind of base on these structures, but you're going to want to cover that up. Unless you have a really beautiful base that you want everybody to see. And if you need to cinch it or whatever shape that you're wanting to make, that chicken wire is your armature, it's your base. Now we're going to start placing the jasmine. The jasmine is going to be our light, airy base to our arch. And you just start by literally poking it through the chicken wire. And we're going to make a nice loose arch today, so letting it hang down and be free and express itself. I love these wispies that are coming down. So you just weave the pieces directly into the chicken wire. Using a tarp when you're building an arch or doing an installation or a structure is a great idea. We're not doing that today because we just used the studio floor as our tarp. As you're building the structure, it's a good idea to, as often as you can, walk away 10 feet away from what you're building and just get a look at it that way from afar. Because sometimes you're so close to it, it's hard to see. It's also a good idea to take a photo of it. You can do that as you're building or when you're finished, but it gives you a different perspective. It may not look like much yet, but now that we have the jasmine in place as kind of our light, airy base, we're gonna start with the flowering branches. A good thing to remember as you're doing this, and this is if you're doing any floral design, it's good to look at the plant or the flower that you're using and think about where it might be best placed. This piece kind of lends itself to being probably on this side. It goes with the natural curve of the arch. I'd like to do a little shout out. My scarf was hand dyed, it's silk, hand dyed right in front of me by the Lesser Bear. She's my girl that I buy ribbon from in Columbus. She's amazing. And then even these little bits, I don't like to waste anything, so I'll be tucking these in some spots that need some love. Next, we're going to be filling in some of our gaps with the weeping cherry. It's super funny to put in there. Now we're going to be putting the stand cherry in, and I think because these are so long, I'm just going to break it up into smaller pieces so that we have little accents of it throughout the arch. Not all your branches have to be perfect, especially if you're one like me that enjoys things as they are in nature. So just remember that when you're building this. So these are the really sensitive guys. But it's always the sensitive ones that are the most special. It's true! So we're going to be putting in the star magnolia, 2 different varieties now. We're getting into the good stuff. So with the bigger blooms, you don't want it to look like polka dots. So as you're putting them in, think of clustering them more, maybe doing some groupings, and also putting some of them a little bit closer to the base of the arch and pulling some of them out, because an important part of design when you're designing installation pieces or any other floral design is dimension. Dimension is what moves the eye through the piece. Almost done with the branches, and then my favorite part starts, placing the flowers. These are perfection. Out of water for 5 days, still perfect. One of my all-time favorite flowers, butterfly ranunculus. Let me introduce you to butterfly ranunculus. When you place the flowers, you're probably going to have to cut the stems and maybe pull off some foliage so you can squeeze it through the chicken wire. And use the same method we were talking about before. Have some a little farther back, have some sneaking out the side. You're going to want all different levels and not just smushed against the structure. Also, as you're doing this, try not to overthink the placement of the flowers. Try not to overthink what you're doing. Go with your gut, put the stems in where you think that they would look best. You can always edit later. The hellebore, I'm going to use more tucked in, a little more tucked in to try to hide some areas of the chicken wire that are still exposed. We have 2 flower varieties left to add to the arch. We have the daffodils picked from my garden and the Tibet roses. I'm going to go ahead and add the daffodils. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to add the roses because I'm really liking the lightness and springiness of the arch the way it is. So I'm going to place the daffodils in more of a clustered manner. The hellebores I placed in kind of more of a symmetrical manner, but these are going to be more clustered, and that'll add a little pop of color. Just when I thought the butterfly ranunculus were my favorite, I started adding the daffodils. And these guys, I think it's with their little butter yellow centers, are putting it over the edge. So we're almost finished with the arch. Actually, I probably would finish it right here, but we have 12 more blooms that I don't want to go to waste. Thank you so much for letting me create this Ode to Spring arch for you. I hope you enjoyed it, and please subscribe to the Passiflora channel. We will be putting out more floral tutorials. Thanks so much.